MarTechTalk, the live webinar with no presentations, no PowerPoint, just talk.
Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of MarTechTalk. I'm your host, Luke, and today we'll be joined by three wonderful panelists. And you're more than welcome to get involved yourself. There's a chat box on the side, and if you want to leave any questions to speak to our panelists, please feel free. Before I introduce them, let's set the scene for what we're discussing this week. This topic is analyzing your automated processes and algorithms. That means we're going to be looking at how to get the most out of your algorithms. An important step to get to that point involves looking at what information your algorithm actually needs for it to work effectively. So we'll be talking about data here and how that is used effectively. Then we'll move on to look at exactly what kinds of control employees should have over automated processes. So who has access to your algorithms and who doesn't. And that applies both to front-facing with vendors and internally also. Then finally, we'll move on to analysis. Specifically, how do you analyze the performance of your bidding, personalization, and pricing algorithms? So let's begin by welcoming our lovely panelists this week. In no particular order, can I ask you to turn on your camera and mic when I introduce you, please? First, we've got Effie, Senior Director of Performance Marketing and Analytics at women's healthcare company Viva Eve. Hi, Effie.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. And next we have Andre, Director of Marketing and Business Development at Laser Crystal Specialist ArtPix 3D. Hi, Andre.
Hello, everyone.
And we have Joanna, Director of Marketing Architecture, Automation and Customer Relationship Management at tech firm HP. Hi, Joanna.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Okay, so let's dive into our news item for this week. We've got an article here from website Silicon Canals about MarTech platform Zyflow. The London-based company has recently raised $20 million in funding. But the part that's worth us taking a look at is where it says, the company offers an online proofing platform that helps teams of all sizes streamline feedback, get aligned, and improve review efficiency. It claims to offer a secure environment where any piece of creative content can be reviewed from anywhere. Big claims indeed. So what are your takes on this? Joanna, can I come to you first on this one?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think every time we talk about the MarTech stack, the first thing that we approach is automation, right? We all want to have more automation to streamline the processes, to have better integrations and so on. And if we are looking at the MarTech landscape right now, it was just announced 12,000 solutions. Huge growth year on year, actually. A lot of solutions that promise automation. And indeed, it still remains a problem in a lot of companies that key processes are not automated. I think it has to do also with the rapid growth of the MarTech landscape that, it's really hard to choose what's happening. And then it also comes down to no matter how much you automate, there is always another opportunity to automate because there are new processes, new demands, customers have higher expectations from the companies. When I'm thinking about automation, and of course, this is a use case very much related to internal processes and how it can help marketers have an automated proofing mechanism. I think in the marketing organization, we should look at it from two different perspectives. One is the automation of all the processes and channel enablement that help marketers have build a better customer experience, right? How can we support, with different algorithms instead of having scoring mechanisms? Can we have predictions? Can we have propensities at least, right, in the middle? What can we do in the end to surprise the customer? Because that's what every company wants. And then it is the second dimension, which for me is same. It has the same importance, which is internal process automation, let's say. because operationally, if a company is not functioning well, that is easily perceived by the customer in the end. So on the process automation, I think it's important to create all these mechanisms to support content creation, to support agency briefing, to understand the performance of the agencies. What are agencies good at, right? Because they have different profiles, and then also connect it with forecasts, budget planning, and then downstream to the content enablement to the channels and building these customer journeys that are more and more complex with the aim to satisfy the customer and answer to their needs.
Complex is a good word there. There's a lot going on, isn't there? That certainly points to a need for these tools, or maybe they make it more complex and more trouble. But yeah, thank you. Effie, can I pass to you next, please?
No, absolutely. And Ioana, you made such amazing comments on this particular subject. For me, just on a high level perspective, we're really talking about how well the abilities of these algorithms are in terms of predicting the outcomes that they have. Of course, in terms of the outcomes that they have, how important is it that they're super accurate? And that will be very different by, that will vary by different industries. And I think the last piece of it, what is the level of, I think, internal feedback or manual review per se, relative to what the outcomes are of these algorithms. And I think these are all going to be super important considerations for this exciting organization.
Thank you, Effie. Yeah, well said. And Andre, can I pass to you next, please?
Yeah, so a lot has been said already. So what I can add is that, like nowadays, businesses cannot control that much of their assets, so they used to advertise. So basically, ad creative remains one of the assets that they like almost 100% can control, and therefore this makes this like Zflow an interesting solution, which I would probably review and try myself. And like two things we need to consider is the first, that like we need to be careful like with using the team's feedback, so and not to involve like too many people into the process, like keep only keep the circle like not that big, and involve only experts, because otherwise like you can just stuck in the like endless communications, and like instead of doing the great creative, you will be like taking care of addressing everyone's feedback, which is also important, but I mean this process can take forever. And the second important thing is that to create some new creative, like using this approach, you cannot only rely on the internal data that business owns in the first place. Like it needs to have access to the market's data, to the competitors' data, and like big ad platforms like Facebook, they are not sharing all of the data that they have, and like they are very selective to which companies they can share. So it's usually companies who can scale like the data that they own. So the regular business won't have that level of access to contribute. So it has to be some large solution provider that has some like advanced partnership with Facebook. So the data is there, both internal and external.
Mm-hmm. And that leads us on to our first point. So I might stay with you, Andre, for that, if that's okay. If you're not talked out already. What information does an algorithm need for it to work? So I know we spoke about data structure optimization yesterday.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, first the like flexible structure has to be in place. So it has to be designed so queries made to the data sets are performed fast, and like basically the storage that doesn't occupy like tons of terabytes. So it can be all kept like cost efficient and fast. The second, like which is like the basics, is like the well-structured historical data in place, which the business owns. Then, as I mentioned before, like market and competition data has to be there. And what is important for the seasonal businesses is that the seasonal trends are also taken into consideration. It's good to have an objective towards which the algorithm is being optimized and trained. And it's a good practice, in my opinion, like to provide several scenarios of the desired outcomes, like the pessimistic, hidden, which will be like the bottom line for the business, the realistic, and the optimistic one.
Right. Okay. And is that those three layers? Is that coming from one department, or is that something that's sort of spread?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, usually it has to be like one responsible department and one main responsible team member who is in charge of everything. And but it doesn't mean that they cannot collaborate with other teams or people. So it's always a good practice. But it's important that somebody, like one department and one employee within this department, is like the end responsible for what is going on there.
Right. Okay. That for me, it feels like that's quite a funnel, isn't it? All going down to that one person. Does that slow things down potentially?
Yeah, I mean, responsibility doesn't mean that there is no team which takes care of all the questions and which works together in the same direction. Of course, there's going to be a team of experts who will be responsible for how algorithm learns and performs at the end of the day. But I mean, if there are like some decisions to make, and there can be like A, B, or C, there's should be like one person who is responsible for taking that end decision. So he or she may consult with other team members, of course, but it cannot be like two people making different decisions within the same team towards the same algorithm.
Right. So is that one sort of sign-off point to finish? And
yeah, exactly.
Cool. Thank you. Effie, can I pass over to you for your take on this, please?
Absolutely. And thank you, Sergey, for all your great comments there as well. I would say just on a super high level, but I'm happy to dig in deeper. It's super important from an organizational perspective, above and beyond, the objectives of the project are going to be, clearly articulated. The other piece of it is because any organization is going to have a mix of technical and non-technical individuals. And I always say any business decision is some combination of art and science, as I truly believe it should be, even though I tend to more lean towards the science part of it. But there is something beautiful about that particular mix. And so it's really important that there's some transparency to all members of the organization in terms of, what is the predictive outcome of this particular algorithmic process, right? And is it understandable to individuals? Because I think some of the dangers that happen are that they appear as black boxes. Human beings, I think, from a psychological perspective, are uncomfortable with change, but yet we pursue change in the same way. So I think really being clear across, all members of the organization in terms of what are the inputs, outputs of this model, and understanding the feedback that employees could provide in terms of informing its importance is going to be super critical. And I think that the last piece that I want to address on this particular subject on a high level, of course, is just the level of human oversight on this, right? There are going to be certain outcomes, and probably most of the outcome. Oh, I'm sorry. There'll be certain outcomes of, the algorithmic outputs that will be super critical in terms of being accurate versus maybe not as super critical, et cetera. And then there's just controls in place in terms of, what's the level of human oversight, and then the feedback loop that occurs with that as well.
Yeah, you used a great term of phrase yesterday when we were talking about this, and you said garbage in, garbage out. And is that where the feedback loop comes in?
Well, actually, that's the beginning of the process. If the actual integrity of the data that's informing these models is not strong enough, but yet the need for uh, a strong predictive quality is important, this project will fail right at the offset. So I think, there's all, every organization has challenges with data integrity. And then it's just a matter of measuring the importance of that against how important the accuracy of the algorithmic output will be.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that ties into passing over to you actually, Joanna, because I think yesterday you spoke about the needs being important. So the start point, kind of assessing where you're going to go. I think, as you said, Andre, the goal at the end of it. So yeah, how do you take this point?
I think, with every automation project, and of course we have discussions about in the marketing organizations about technical people, business people, kind of. I think the most important when you start a project is to have a very good KPI framework to understand your baseline. Where are you with a certain process, with a certain implementation? What do you try to achieve? But where are you starting? Because what I'm observing is that even though we are focusing so much on data, enhancing data and make it more standardized, we miss this data. We have too much data. So these things happen over time. What I think is important is also to understand that we have different assumptions and different hypotheses when we start a project, and over time that might change. And going back to our baseline of KPIs is very important to understand, okay, how is the baseline moving and what do we need to do? Start it as a new project. We have new assumptions, so what can we improve, right? And when it comes to automations, I think data is important, but it's probably extremely difficult. I see this on my side, and it's good that we're sharing all these thoughts, because I think we have the same challenges, and I'm sure even our audience is just like nodding. Oh yeah, we have this as well. With data, I find it is exactly like with technology. There is an abundance of options, and sometimes you have a need, especially when you start a process that it's fully manual. You can detect the data that you need immediately. You know exactly what you're implementing, you select it, you put it together. But I feel that as you go more mature with several technologies or with several algorithms or predictions and so on, it's harder and harder to understand what kind of data you need. Because you have the basic, but going from 80% to 100% is the most difficult. Getting to 80% is not that difficult. So I think this is a challenge that we all have. And what I'm doing, and I see some interesting results, is that I'm just piloting quite a lot with different solutions to see if that new data set might validate a hypothesis, if it can be helpful or not. And if not, I drop it. If yes, then I'm trying to scale it and see if it's bringing more value.
And so that then you need that feedback at the end to see how the value is measured and then what to feed in next?
Yes, exactly. Again, it starts with the KPIs, right? And with the hypothesis that you have when you start a project. You might have different data when it's first-party data, different data for media, different data for internal processes, right? Because you might even want to measure, for example, on the internal process, which is not necessarily, top of mind when we talk about MarTech technology. You want to measure, for example, content velocity or asset variation, right? So those are KPIs that you need to look into continuously, see if you can improve, and then be open-minded all the time. Okay, this is the result. Does it make sense or not? So this feedback loop, I would say, it's extremely important. And again, review your hypothesis continuously, because the world is changing as well, right? And our customers are changing too. Different channels, different even preference for content. We change with the world, and marketing has to be there with the new demand.
Yeah, I'm drawn to this feedback thing. I know I've spoken about it a few times, but the continuous kind of checking in on how it's doing. I mean, measuring that value in itself seems challenging. Are we talking live, or are we talking there's a goal? Once we get to that goal, then we're checking what comes back, or are we adding more points to get more feedback along the way? I mean, the timing part of it seems important as well.
Yeah, agree. I think all of these are different dimensions, right, that we need to take into consideration. For some projects, you just want to add more data because you feel that the result is not relevant enough. So maybe you don't have enough data set. Maybe in other situations, you have too much data and you realize the results are maybe too targeted. Let's say you have clusters are too small and maybe doesn't worth the effort. But in the same time, again, you always need to be updated with what's happening and get that data, try it on, see if it's working for you or not.
Thanks. And I'm going to come back around to you, Andre, for our next point here. We're talking about control and employee control. So we're not moving completely away from data here because it's still coming through different points, but specifically who should have control over automated processes, and what control should they have in your experience?
Like all people in the organization can have access to provide feedback and to see how the algorithm is doing and what results it produces. But it's gotta be different access levels. And what I think Ioana mentioned yesterday is that the right word for this, we need to have the access governance. So we defined which employees have the master access and can do whatever they need, whatever that can be done to adjust the algorithm, who has to have the limited administration access. So not all the features are available for the change. Which employees need to only provide feedback and participate in the communications, so discussions regarding how and what can be changed. And I think I agree with Effie. She mentioned that it's gotta be something that is transparent to all the company employees, so everyone knows what's going on, and they might have some idea that might be useful to improve it. So, but it does not mean that they necessarily need to participate in the decision making. And the second thing to mention here is it's good to have the ability to to train the model. So even when we have all the data in place, both internal and external third-party data, so there is something that you cannot tell the algorithm with the data. So you don't know, you cannot predict what additional information you need to feed to the algorithm as an input for it to learn. So therefore, it's always good to have some manual entry points. A good example, even let's say we have all the data we need, but for one day the data was not being collected. It means that for algorithm, it will be drop in sales for the day, something like that. So we need to either be able to exclude that one day from the from the learning input feedback, or we need to be able to replace it with some adjustments that can be done often only manually. So and also about the control. So you basically need to before going live with you can do some test runs, so you see how it works, and you can, let's say, make your employees play a role as the customers, and train algorithm on their behavior. So this feedback can be also used for the algorithm improvement.
I like the idea of adapting it manually when you drop a day. That's fascinating.
That's happening all the time. I mean.
Yeah. I wonder how AI will fit into that. Fill that gap, perhaps. But talking of AI, I know yesterday, Effie, you talked about this being attracted to a shiny object, and I wonder how that fits in with the employees and access to automated processes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a wonderful point that you're raising. I've worked at many organizations, and every organization I can say with honesty, there was, someone that was a member of the senior leadership team that just loved the idea, right, of getting involved in these really, advanced vanguard types of, technologies, right? Which is what I call this shiny object. Really, I think the importance when you're evaluating that, by the way, it's a wonderful thing to pursue, right? You're thinking about the future, where the organization could be. Some of the organizations I worked at would also have blind spots in terms of, the capabilities of bringing something that into life, or even if there were, maybe rogue or vague capabilities, it wouldn't be executed, in terms of the full potential of the vision that the particular individual had. So I would say it's really, really important to just think about your business, um, where you are, where you want to be, and also, the capabilities and resources to take it there now, and are there any gaps in terms of taking it into the future, and then invest in these types of technologies.
And then give access to everyone, or are you can invest in technology based on who can use it and how they need it, or is it kind of invest in technology and then see how it will get picked up and used throughout the company?
Well, I think it depends on the technology investment, right? There may be some that will be very limited to a specific use case, for, a MarTech activation. Maybe it's just marketing, maybe with a little bit of operational input. And then there might be, some technologies that you're investing in that will be really, really truly cross-functional, where there will be a wider group of individuals. So there's an element of, which departments get engaged. And I think the other level of consideration will be, within the desired department, which types of individuals get engaged. But I think one of the things that I think about, especially in terms of the principles of change management, that I would encourage any organization to consider, there's always going to be, you're always going to try to establish a mutual awareness, right? That a problem exists. If you don't get past that point, it'll be really hard to get, further momentum. And then the other piece that I've noticed, maybe some organizations I've worked at didn't fully consider, would be, what kind of bandwidth are you requiring from individuals relative to their current bandwidth? Is there any way that you can make their jobs easier in terms of really activating this particular, technology or whatever it is, change management piece? And then the final piece would be, do all stakeholders in this particular project also appreciate that it really is a mutual value that benefits all? And I think if you don't really have alignment across all those three areas of awareness, bandwidth, and consequences, any project will most likely not succeed to its full potential.
Thank you. That's really clearly said. I think our guests will appreciate that. Our audience will appreciate that. And I'm left wondering about internal versus external. I know yesterday, Joanna, you mentioned you've got some experience with the process automation for customer versus employee side of things. I wonder if you could share a bit on that, please.
I was just thinking about everything Andre and Effie said. And I think I'm just going to compliment, nothing new probably. But I think it's very important with all the tech that we have to build a governance model. And I feel this is also very much related to the maturity of the organization, because you might have organizations where marketers have more digital skill set, but you might have organizations where you have an operational framework that is doing execution fully. Marketers only need to be aware of the capabilities and possibilities. And then definitely, I believe it's mandatory to have that one team that is controlling what's happening with the technology. And that's, the admin level access that you need to have. Because otherwise, if everybody has admin access and these people don't communicate, it can be a mess in the end, right? So again, it depends on the tools. I don't think we are expecting marketers to know how to code in HTML, but I think marketers can use several tools that are user friendly to make their job easier, right? And also about the shiny tool, I think we've all been there. There is always something new. And it's normal, right? Again, coming back to the MarTech landscape, huge. It's impossible to know all the tools, and there is always another tool that promises something that you don't have. I find very important that the team, let's say the platform team, the admin team, the technology team, however we want to call it, the one that has admin access to all these tools, and it's also analyzing new tools, to have a very good framework of assessment in terms of the new tools, in terms of the business case, in terms of the capabilities, and always open up. Like if you have a request, hey, look at this tool, don't just go for that tool, but instead try to understand what other tools are there on the market and do a larger comparison. Because then, even if there is a push for you to get the tool, let's say, in the end, you have also options, and you can be a consultant to your leadership. You can be a consultant to your business team. Instead of saying, no, we are not going because we can't, you can have a better perspective and really provide some valuable advice to them.
Brilliant. And that brings us nicely onto our next point about bidding and pricing algorithms. And I'll start again with you, Andre, if that's okay. It's the point was, how do you analyze the performance of your bidding, personalization, and pricing algorithms? I think you gave a Facebook example yesterday.
Yeah, I will provide this example shortly. So in the first place, the algorithm and what it does, it has to make sense. So, okay, let's say there is an algorithm that predicts the sales revenue and, let's say, ROAS and other marketing KPIs that help to describe how efficiently we advertise, and let's say it builds a forecast for next 3 months. And if the algorithm will project you increase the of the sales revenue 3 times, and but it cannot be with the same ROAS. So I mean, because obviously when we scale, it takes some time for the algorithm to learn and to select what audience to target. If we are talking about some social ad platforms like Facebook, Pinterest, Snapchat, TikTok ads. So, and if it tells you that you're gonna grow with the same efficiency, I mean, it doesn't make sense, because you first drop a little bit, and when it picks up, then you can go back to the efficiency you used to have or grow it. So it has to make sense, and you understand it based on the numbers. So for that, the person that who is in charge of developing that algorithm, he needs to understand the basic marketing KPIs, or if it's not if it's related to some other sphere of the business, it has to be expert in that sphere. So second, you need to make sure that when you the investments you make into the automation and algorithm development is ROI positive. So if you automated something and it costs you let's say, I don't know, plus 100K per year, and like you don't get that big uplift, and the same thing can be done manually with like more cost efficient, and like such algorithm, they just like they are not worth in like investing into. So sometimes, like, even if it works great, I mean that's not that big deal to keep doing this any longer. So about the Facebook example, so and I have a Google example too. So they introduced this Advantage Plus campaign several months ago, which is like similar to what Google has with their Performance Max campaigns. So you marketer basically controls what the budget will be on a daily basis, and it fits like the ad creatives that will be shown to people, and the algorithm defines the target audience and like and adjust the bids to compete for the ad impressions. But like at the end of the day, like if like there is, let's say you have like 20 different ads and one is working super great in the beginning, that you will end up having like 95 or more percent of the budget allocated to that ad, and it's not going to change over time because other ads just don't have chances because they do not have enough data. There is another one single ad that is efficient according to the Facebook algorithm, and those other ads, they just won't get any chance to show them, and they might be great. So and if you want to have more control, it means you need to be launching several campaigns of the same type, and there might be some other ads that will perform better. But those campaigns, if they are aimed to achieve the same goal, so let's say like acquire website visitors during the Mother's Day season, which has just ended for us, for example. So they will be just competing with each other, and your CPC will go up. Again, doesn't make any sense. The same for Google also. So we used to have a automated bidding for our brand campaign, and when we just tried to manage it manually and set bids ourselves and adjust it when we like based on the performance, we'll just ended up having the same level of sales, but we started our spend decreased like 50%. So like not all the automation and algorithms they really work that well. So you need to compare, like to be more close to reality, so not just strive to automate what can be automated. So and probably, yeah, the last thing we already talked about is like um, you need to compare how the algorithms work towards the goals that you have. So otherwise, I mean, if it's like if something is a bit better because you apply algorithm, it doesn't mean that it solves your problem or like reaches your initial objective.
Thank you. We've got a question here as well. I'm going to keep going around the group, and then Claire, we'll come back to your question after everyone's had their say. Just to let you know, we've seen you there. Effie, can I pass to you next, please?
Of course.
Thank you.
Of course. Oh, do you want me to answer a question or just give you my feedback?
Yeah, just on the how to analyze your performance of your bidding, personalization, and pricing algorithms. Yeah, if you could, your experience on that would be welcome.
I am experienced in that. And by the way, Sergey gave amazing examples and responses to that. I would say I tend to go high level and then go deeper into, the details of things. This is just based on my experience. It's really important that organizations, of course, understand their business goals. They all, but really, really, truly understand their customers. And then the other piece of it is really align those goals with the advertising platforms. So I'll talk a little bit about the advertising platforms and then touch upon the customer behavior, right? And then how you may want to think about aligning yourself with that, right? So the first piece of it is, I remember, when search engines came on the block, and there were many of them, And we all had our preferences, etc. And then eventually, I remember always really just loving Google because they had a very simplified type of, you know, um, interface compared to the others where it was just crowded with advertising, etc. And then the other piece of it is they really serve me relevant results. So in the early days of Google advertising, and I'm only bringing up Google because a lot of the other digital advertising platforms adopted this model as well. The person that paid the highest bid always won. But when you look at, the investor calls right now, any advertising platform, monthly active users is going to be super important in terms of the valuation of a lot of these advertising platforms. And when you think about that, what that means is that they both need to scale their users, but also engage them actively. Which I think is probably every goal of any organization as well. And so, what a lot of these advertising platforms did in the mid 2000s, particularly Google, it wasn't the highest bidder that was guaranteed to win the auction market, but it was going to be the highest bidder that was relevant, right? Because they needed to really boost their monthly active user, metrics and their valuations. So what has happened is that I think a lot of individuals may or may not realize it subconsciously. It's not just, you have two major levers, right, in terms of aligning your business model with the way that these advertising platforms work, right? And it's going to be your bid, and it's also going to be the relevancy. You get relevancy metrics, right? Certainly within Google and Facebook, which are really top advertising platforms. I think that a lot of that gets ignored. And then the other piece of it, when we talk about the business side of things, it's really important to just understand your customers. I would say one of the more challenging organizations that I worked at, but not in a bad way, of course, is that it took 6 months to get them to actually physically onboard, from a lead to a sale. And then when they were a customer, they were gone within 6 months. So you really needed to make sure that you were optimizing the acquisition efficiency in a way that was greater than the attrition loss that happened. And I think many organizations that I personally worked at would really evaluate, oh, well, in this month we got this many sales, and we spent this much, and there's my return on ad spend. And I would say that's misleading, and all you need to do is get around. So really being able to adopt a cohort way of aligning your advertising spend to the revenue that you're generating is going to be super efficient. Once you've established that particular framework, then you get into the piece of, well, how do I allocate my budget across that? The way I like to approach it is from a constrained optimization approach, but then other organizations, they use a combination of media mix models, multi-touch attribution models, and lift methodology. But for me, I've always been inspired by the airline industry, which is super complicated, right? They have a media mix model problem that, transcends, I think, what most marketers do. But in essence, you want to maximize your revenue, and you're always going to be subject to certain constraints. And I only bring up the airline industry because their constraints are way more intense than us. But from a marketing organization, the constraints that you're going to experience would be, I can only spend this much, or I can only spend this much on this channel, or I don't want to be too disruptive to my advertising ecosystem. And so I don't want to do too many adjustments, 10 or 20% subject to those goals, etc. but it's a fascinating way, especially if your organization is a little bit more pliable in terms of their budget planning processes, in terms of allocating resources across channels. And of course, you always want to continually improve with A/B testing. And then lastly, just benchmarking your performance against goals and integrating that feedback loop.
Brilliant. Thank you, Effie. And I don't want to disrupt I didn't want to disrupt your flow there, but I'm aware we've come out to the end of time. So Joanna, rather than give you space to talk on that point, we usually have a little Q&A at the end. I'll ask one question and each of you gives a yes or no answer just to wrap up. But what I'll do this week is, because Claire's given us a question and she said, how do you think algorithms will change over time for marketers? So I'm going to turn that into a little a yes or no. And I'm going to say, do you think AI will be integral for marketers this year? A yes or no answer, please. And I'll go first of all, Joanna.
Yes.
Yes.
I think it's going to be a very interesting mix between what we know as marketing technology with AI embedded.
Okay, thank you. And Effie?
The answer is yes. I'll stay curt on the response, given that I was verbose on the previous one.
Thank you. And Andre?
Yeah, I also think yes.
Okay, yeah, very hopeful for AI then. Okay, thank you, everybody. We have run out of time now. Thanks to our panelists for joining us, and thanks to our guests. Join us next week on Tuesday the 23rd at 3 p.m. BST, where the subject is lead management automation. Is your MarTech lagging behind? Until then, have a great week and goodbye for now.